inspiring you to set the marketplace ablaze in partnership with an awesome and limitless God. This is the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast, and this isn't business as usual. Here's your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shay Bynes.
Welcome back to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. This is your host, Shay Bynes, and our goal here is to inspire you to operate your business completely yielded and in partnership with our awesome and limitless God. Today's guest is Paul Wilson Jr., Director of the Small Business Development Center in Atlanta, Georgia. I actually rearranged our podcast production schedule to bring you this timely conversation. One of the things that we did is send a survey out to the entire Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur community and ask a series of questions to kind of get a sense of what the needs are in the community in this season. And so from those surveys, there's a number of things that we are doing in Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur to provide resources, to provide a platform for prayer, to connect people who have resources to give to people who have resources that they need, and just do what we can as Team KDE to assist the community at this time. And so one of the things I really wanted to do when I heard from my friend Paul Wilson Jr., he'd asked me about sharing just some of the resources that are available to business owners. Now, this is a United States conversation, so I need to say this up front, but just to share some of the resources that are available right now to small business owners across the United States and as well as some of the U.S. territories. And I thought, you know what, we're going to kind of break away from our typical format to bring this information to the community. Some of this information you may have heard, some of it may be providing clarity to some questions that you have. And just might be one little nugget of insight that you didn't have. Now, I also thought that it would be really cool, since it is the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast, that I would also have a conversation with Paul about his transition, because he was a full-time entrepreneur and is now working as an employee, as the director of Small Business Development Center. So I wanted to talk about that transition from entrepreneurship to serving entrepreneurs and how God has led him in that journey. And so that will be a conversation that everybody can benefit from. And so I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way so we can get started with today's episode with Paul Wilson Jr. Listen in and enjoy. Paul Wilson Jr., what's up, man?
How you doing? Good to be here.
I'm doing great. It's really good, first of all, to see you.
Right, absolutely.
Although the people who are listening can't, but it's good for me.
It's okay.
It's been a long time since I've seen you, so it's good to see you. And man, you're doing so. It was so cool to hear from you, because you'd reached out to me a few days ago on LinkedIn about talking about just the stuff going on in the pandemic and the resources available to business owners, and just offered to share with the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur community. So I'm so glad you did. You had I want people to know, Paul Wilson Jr. is in part responsible for the book Grace Over Grind, because it was a conversations that we had on the podcast, you, me, and Amos and Antonina. In 2013, very, very soon after KDE started. Gotcha. 2013, in the very early episodes of the podcast, when you were talking about this, about what God was speaking to you about not grinding and stuff like that. And then I told you about that moment I had with my pastor when he brought out Matthew 11:28-30 in the Message translation. Those were the beginning conversations on the topic of Grace Over Grind.
Right. That's incredible. And even I think 2013,
I know.
way back then, from that standpoint.
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so at that time you were doing KBU, Kingdom Business University. You have since transitioned into something new. So why don't you just share with us what you're doing right now? Because that also gives us context for some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today.
Definitely. So, after a winding road, which we'll get into a little bit, for the last 2-3 years, I've been with the University of Georgia Small Business Development Center, and now I'm the area director at the specific location. I'm at Georgia State University, actually in downtown Atlanta. And so we provide no cost or free consulting services and market research for small businesses, anywhere from business planning, business strategy, marketing, accounting, HR, pretty much anything that you can think of that you need in your business. Other than we don't do tax advice or legal consultations. So other than that, we pretty much kind of cover the wide range of businesses and resources. And it's amazing. Again, because of course you have a nationwide community. The SBDC network actually is across the entire country. So you can actually Google or log on and try to find your closest SBDC and get some very similar resources.
Very good. So yes, so those who are listening who are outside of the United States, this particular episode of the resources that we're talking about are available to anybody in the United States. Is that correct? Business owners within the United States. Okay, awesome. Right. Now, before we get into this, because I wanted to have this conversation with you because there's so much kind of going on. There's a lot of resources with the recent stimulus, that went through. That made a lot of things available, but it also created a lot of questions and a lot of confusion around what's available. So I wanted to have that conversation. But before we dig into that, you and I, before I hit record, we were talking about some of your personal transition stuff. And I'm like, this is goodness. We should talk about this on the podcast about your transition as a business owner and the journey that it took you into employment again. So I want to talk about that and some of the struggles even that you had in that and really just kind of coming to terms with what God has for you. So can you let's have that chat first and then we'll get into the other stuff.
Sure. So let's go back to 2013. And during that time, like you said, I was leading an organization called Kingdom Business University. We're built around training, right? And live training, as well as, helping business owners really understand the call of God in their lives as it relates to business. That's how we got connected, right?
That's right.
Because you're doing KDE. And so it was a really good connection. Again, like I said, Amos was with me at that time. We're doing a lot of joint stuff together. We're still friends, which is good, but we're doing a lot of joint training and things together at that time. But what most people probably didn't know is how much I was struggling financially, right? In terms of, because actually my business was going well. Because one aspect of my business prior to KBU was I was a business consultant, actually working with large corporations, right? Providing supplier diversity training and supplier development. And when the economy crashed, right. At that time, it's amazing we're almost back in that place, but economy crashed.
Right.
So all my contracts went away. And so I didn't have any corporate customers anymore. So that's when I really locked in on small business development. But again, it was just a struggle. And as a matter of fact, our house got foreclosed on. We lost our house back about during that time, actually right before 2013. And so, but I was so intent and stubborn on making this business work as a small business consultant, speaker. So I was an author. I'd written a couple of books, and I traveled around a little bit around the country, different churches. But it just, you want to talk about a grind? I was talking about grace over grind, but I was feeling more grind than grace at that time. But sometimes it happens, right? We'll get revelation before it actualizes in our own lives a lot of times.
It's true.
So it was revealed, but I didn't have the experience yet from that standpoint. But I was trying to make it work. And I was refusing to go to work. I literally was refusing to go get a job. So I even had this embedded thought process. So one of the opportunities I did have, I was an adjunct professor. So I was actually teaching at a Christian college, business is mission. And so in a couple of my classes, I actually would even say stuff like this, that God can use you more as an entrepreneur than he can use you as an employee. And I said it several times, right? And it was so embedded in my mind that one time I was about to say it again in class. I literally heard the Holy Spirit tell me in a nanosecond to shut up. And I knew it was him, and nobody else in the room did. But I knew it was him. And it was almost like in a split second, he gave me like a whole conversation in a matter of like a half a second. Nobody else in the room knew. But the whole conversation literally was around, I can use anybody anywhere as big as I want to use them in any way.
That's right.
At that point, it's like, and again, but even for me, it was still like, okay, well, that's for everybody else.
Right. But for me. Yes.
Right. I just want to say that again.
Right.
But I'm still, pursue my business.
Right.
And so, but that was a struggle of my identity had been so connected to being an entrepreneur that I was just either overlooking or justifying or just trying to smooth over the things that just were not working, to really realize that God had something different for me. still in the entrepreneurial space, but in that season, it just wasn't for me to be an entrepreneur. So he has a sense of humor. So at the point when I finally decided, okay, let me go find a job, because my background is supply chain, right? So that's what I'm gonna go back to look for a job. And so
wait. I have to stop you though. What was the point when you, like, what happened? Like, what was the point where you're like, I have to go get a job? Like, was it your wife that got through to you? Was it the Holy Spirit? Like, what happened?
It was an accumulation. You know, my wife was one. Although she really supported me the whole time, but it was kind of like practically gritted teeth. You know?
Right.
My pastor, mentor, God had to send a whole lot of people.
There's a whole lot of confirmation coming around you.
Right, exactly. And the thought that comes to mind, I was watching Incredibles the other night. I don't know if you remember the part of the scene where he's Mr. Incredible is running, but then he gets hit with all these balls. Yes. And eventually he can't run anymore because I think that was me. I get hit once, I kept running, kept running. It took a whole lot to get me to finally realize, okay, let's go in a different direction. So I don't think it was probably one thing. I think it was accumulation.
Okay, it was the group of balls that came and hit you that made it clear. Okay, so all right, so going back to where you were, supply chain, go ahead.
Supply chain. So I'm looking for all these supply chain jobs. Nobody would call me back. Nobody would respond to my resume. Nobody would respond to anything. And so finally, when somebody did finally respond, and I probably went through that process for at least probably a good 6-7 months, like every single day, literally 4 or 5 resumes, and just constantly just bombarding, on all the, job search sites and things like that. Just could not get a response. My assumption is that, I've been so far removed from supply chain that I guess people didn't think I have relevant skills anymore. So it was hard. And this may be a tip for some people who are going back and looking for a job. So I even went to the point of where previously, right, I was touting my entrepreneurial experience. So like my LinkedIn profile, CEO. I went back and changed stuff. Just basically strategic consultant, right? Because again, your perception has to change. Even other people will view that. Okay, do you just want this job until you can get back?
Right.
So I even had to take the steps to actually change my resume and everything, so it looked like I was a strategic consultant or senior consultant. I think is the term I use, versus even CEO. Even at that time, just to
focus
try to
on
help
your function rather than that's
Absolutely.
What you functionally did, even though you were the business owner and you were the CEO.
Correct. Yeah. So just to try to get a nibble, get a bite. And eventually somebody did call me back, but God in his sense of humor, it was a company that was providing training for TANF, which is the food stamps program, kind of a welfare to work kind of program. But it was teaching people, guess what? How to go get a job. So it wasn't teaching people how to start a business. It was literally, I was teaching other people how to go get a job. That was one of my first kind of part-time jobs as I was transitioning back into the workforce. And so it was like, are you serious? It was like, I'm still kind of internally still really want to start a business. So I'm reluctantly searching for jobs. So finally, the only person who would call me back initially, somebody was basically saying, I need you to come teach people how to go get a job.
That's hilarious.
I was like, it is. And so, so I did that, and I'm still kind of looking for other work. And then I get laid off from that job because they ran out of money. It was like a grant funded program. They ran out of money and I got laid off. So I'm like, okay, I went and got a job. They laid me off. See, that's why I
got to go back to business. It's a sign.
You're right. I wish it was that easy, but it was still like, no, you need to keep looking for another job. Right. So the second job that comes up was I get the opportunity again to go teach people how to get a job. In this case, it was adults with special needs. So some of them had like Asperger's, high functioning Asperger's and autism spectrum. And so it was like, are you serious? So the only people that call me back are the people who want me to teach somebody else how to go get a job. So it was almost like God had to just really drill in me what the next season of my life needed to look like.
Yes.
So eventually, I think at that point is I think when I was really, the breakdown really kind of happened internally to really submit to, because my whole commute was just crazy during that time. It was probably at least 150 miles a day from dropping the kids off going to work, going back and getting the kids. And then because our living situation was crazy. So the kids were going to school far away from where we were living.
Right.
And so just my one-way commute, during that time was pretty wild. So I think that really ended up breaking me to the point where, and at this point I was applying for jobs, not even expecting anybody to call me back. I was just so like, I'm just doing it just because now, because I don't even think anybody's gonna call me back. And then eventually the Small Business Development Center reached out to me, and it was interesting. It's kind of one of those things. So I was like, "Are y'all serious? Y'all like seriously want to interview me?
Do you want me to teach people how to get a job, or?"
Right, exactly. Is that what you're asking? Like, is this really entrepreneurship related? No, right. Y'all trying to trick me. So they called me back. And I went for an interview, and this was even interesting because I went for the interview. And interview went great. Again, very interesting job. I got to work with the university system, coaching entrepreneurs on the stuff that I was doing before, but now I'm actually going to get a salary to do it. And I get a call a week later, and the lady's like, "Well, we decided to hire somebody else." I was like, "Lord, see?" And so, but in the conversation, she said, however, one of the other people is a committee interview. One of the other people who's on the committee, he actually has the same job coming up in a couple of weeks, and he's very interested in you. He's going to give you a call. And what was interesting, even from where I live, like it would have been about almost a 50-mile commute from where I live if I had to be in the office every day for the initial interview that I actually got turned down for. The interview that actually I ended up getting, and so gentleman called me back, went through the process, got hired, was actually in downtown Atlanta at probably for this network for one of the premier locations in the state.
Nice.
For this particular job as a consultant under this director. And he actually said to me after he hired me, he said, "I was hoping she did not hire you because I wanted you for myself." But they couldn't, in the interview, he couldn't say I had another job open coming up.
Right.
He was secretly hoping that she didn't hire me so that he could. And wouldn't you know, within the time frame of him hiring me, about a year and a half later, he was transitioning out the door to go to another job that then allowed me to get elevated to the director of this particular office.
I love it. That's so good. So on one hand, one of the things you had said to me was, what's great is that I'm doing the type of work that I was doing before and desired to do, but now I'm able to do it at a greater level, and it's funded.
Absolutely. It's funded. And even with the people I'm helping, because before, as much as I was helping with even revelation knowledge, but also business resources, it was really my experience I was helping them with. I didn't really have any real resources to bring to them. But once I started this job, I have the entire resource of the entire small business center network. I mean, even things like research, and just for one example, like research reports that if you and I, let's say on our own, went to some of these research companies that they get, it could be $2,000 or $3,000 per research report.
Yeah.
As part of our process and as part of our consulting, we can actually give that to clients as part of the package free of charge. Right. So real resource, in addition, let's say to just the knowledge and experience got allowed me to gain during this time. So now the help, and again, even when I showed up, I didn't have big enough name yet. But when I showed up, people were like, "Oh, it's Paul Wilson," right? Some people did. People who knew me did. People who knew me did. But if they didn't know who I was, right?
Right.
That's nice. You're another consultant, right? You're just another consultant. But now when I show up, if they don't know my name, they don't have to. But when I show up and I say I'm with the University of Georgia or Georgia State University or with the Small Business Development Center, here's Perk Up. They don't even have to know my name. And then all of a sudden, oh, you work for them, or here's what you provide. And it's a different level of engagement. But even more than that, not just the name recognition, it's really the resources. It's the tools, which we'll talk about in a second, right, that we can really help business owners with, right, from that standpoint. And I'll tell you a quick story that didn't even involve us. So I don't know if you're familiar with the show that came out almost 9 months ago, Undercover Billionaire.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yes.
Well, do you remember the first episode? He went to the Small Business Development Center in Erie, Pennsylvania.
I didn't see that episode.
You didn't see that. So if you go back, anybody goes
I
back.
I got to go back now.
Episode. So of course, right. That's the first place to say, okay, put me anywhere in the country, and I can build this $1 million business. Well, so Erie, of course, is the place he ends up. So one of the very first places he goes after he kind of gets settled is the Small Business Development Center in Erie, Pennsylvania, to talk with the lady there. And it's interesting that, so I guess he was encouraging people, say, hey, wherever you're in the country, go find your SBDC. We started getting calls right, from people saying, hey, I saw you. Right, exactly. It was free advertising. But just to let you know, I mean, if the billionaire is going to go to the SBDC, right, and get help, right. I mean, everybody else
good resources there. Exactly, oh, gosh. Okay, now before we talk about that, I want you to share this one thing too, which is kind of how you resolved in your heart this whole thing around entrepreneurship, and then taking this, going into employment and not feeling like it's less than or anything like that. And kind of that process God took you through for you to get to a place of wholeness as it relates to the assignment.
Right. Absolutely. And because one of the things, as we were sharing before the recording started, is, well, so when I first got the job, my mindset was this was a consolation prize because my entrepreneurship dream didn't work. Right. So this was like second place, kind of, if you will, even third place. And so even getting the job, it was still a struggle initially until, in this case, it was a conversation with my pastor, maybe a couple of them, when he really kind of helped me see a different perspective. And in particular, specifically, he kept using the word Joseph and how Joseph was in position, right, with Pharaoh to help his family when the time of the famine came. And he said, I really believe God is positioning you as a Joseph in this position. And that really helped kind of shift my thought process. That really kind of shifted my heart and my commitment to the position, and not just, okay, I'm just here until my next entrepreneurial gig comes up. But, I'm going to be here as long as, God, you want me here. Because then even as I started interacting with people and for one, getting to share my faith with people, even getting to pray with people who are struggling in their business, although it wasn't an official part of my title like I would have thought before, like I liked it having like that before. But now, it was almost more, I was kind of incognito and undercover, but for believers, we were able to have a different conversation. But definitely, in position again, like Joseph was with Pharaoh, to really be a resource provider. And it's interesting, even as we kind of transition and talk about these programs, it's so much more true today than it was even when I got hired. Because when I got hired, the economy's still good, still helping people, or right there on a daily basis, and definitely educating people and bringing resources to people. But it's even on a whole nother level now when so many more people are struggling, right, and need access and information and walk them through. And in some cases, tell them it's going to be okay. But definitely, not only tell them it's going to be okay, but here's what you need to do next. Here, take these 3 steps. Go to this website, click on this thing right here, and really explain it to people in detail. I mean, that's really been kind of my role in the last probably 4 weeks or so, has really been kind of one-on-one with people, even more so than we normally are. It's really helping them, kind of navigate this space right now. And so, so it was really that conversation. And it was interesting, right? Because I studied Joseph for myself, teaching everybody else, right? Who Joseph was, what Joseph did. And then, but again, it was always those people over there, right? You over there, right? Until it became me.
Until it was you.
Absolutely. And then God was like, well, this is where I want you. This is where I need you.
Yes.
In this position right here for a time literally such as this. And a lot of times we say those kind of not cliches, it's scripture, but a lot of times we use them as cliches until it really becomes real. And then it's the rubber there at that point meets the road. Do we really believe what we're reading? And also, are we really willing to step into the role that wasn't part of our plan, but it was part of God's plan?
Yeah. So good. So good. Okay. So we're going to transition. There's a lot of business owners. There's these programs that are available. I know of a few of them. I've had my husband, go ahead and fill out the paperwork for one of them today, that whole thing. Can you take us through and maybe give us an overview over some of the key resources that have been made available through this recent stimulus for small business owners and help them to figure out whether it applies to them or not? Because that seems to be a bit of a question people have based on the different business types.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I might actually back up and kind of give a little narrative, even as I explain the program, so also people can kind of see how some of the pieces fit together.
Absolutely.
So of course, the SBA has probably become one of the most common acronyms right, over the last 4 weeks, but also give people context of just kind of how this plays out, right? Because again, so the Small Business Development Center, we're a resource partner of the SBA, and we're funded by the SBA. So that's how we can offer our consulting services for free, because the money is coming from the SBA as well as from the University Center or University System of Georgia, and similar in other states too. Comes from some from the SBA, some from the university system. So in a, let's say, normal environment, the SBA, people have heard the term SBA loan, but typically the SBA loan is only a disaster loan. So the SBA typically does not loan money. Banks loan money, and there are SBA programs that the bank uses to loan that money. And then the bank basically is the insurance policy. So if a borrower defaults on the money, right, the SBA will back that loan up to say, okay, we'll pay the bank back if the borrower doesn't come through. So typically the only time the SBA has any type of lending is in a disaster. But that disaster is typically physical. Fire, flood, tornado, or hurricane, right? They'll come down, work with business owners in those physical destruction situations, right? Natural disasters, and provide loans. That's the only time the SBA historically has provided loans, because that's how they're set up. This is the first time in the history of this country. And the SBA, so SBDC is over 40 years old. I think the SBA may be old. SBA is older than that. I'm not sure exactly how old, but let's say at least 50 years. And all that time, they have never declared an economic disaster, not even 9/11. The nation was not declared an economic disaster zone. This is the very first time that they've done that. Well, in doing that, they created these loan programs initially. So this is actually before the economic stimulus was even passed, the $2 trillion. This was actually 2 weeks before that. The SBA and the Treasury Department said, hey, we're going to create this. We're going to basically create another category of disaster loan called economic injury. So if you hear the term EIDL, EIDL, so EIDL, we'll use the term EIDL now. It's called economic injury disaster loan. So that was set up. And the benefit of that is that since they already had an infrastructure for natural disaster loans, they just added this additional program. So you can go literally straight to the SBA website and literally apply online. Well, within about 3 days, guess what? That website crashed.
Right.
It crashed. So you couldn't even get on. And it was actually a very long application. You couldn't even get on the website for almost a week. It was at least 5 days. But when they brought the website back up, so as that's still happening, the economic stimulus conversation was still going on. And if you hear the term Corona Cares Bill, PPP, that wasn't even passed yet. We're still talking about the first couple of weeks of March. So they finally got the website back up. So you can again get on now. It's pretty simple, actually, only about a 12 to 15 minute application. So with the EIDL loan, again, so you can cover anything, from your operating expenses, right? So really, literally almost anybody can apply, whether you're a solo entrepreneur, whether you have employees, as well as if you're a nonprofit, a religious nonprofit can actually apply for an EIDL loan, right? There have been some changes. Initially, depending on how big you were, that loan could be up to $2 million, right? Depending on your revenues and your income. Just in the last week or so, probably because of such of the crush of the applications, they've actually kind of limited that cap now to about $25,000. Some people have been hearing about this, what we'll call this grant, right? Which basically what it was, what it still is connected to the EIDL loan overall, and that $10,000. So how that was going to work is, let's say you apply for the regular EIDL loan. And right now, literally, you go through the application. It's a little checkbox. All you have to do is check the box. Do you want an EIDL loan in advance? Check yes. Might as well. And the goal was to send you $10,000 quickly while they're still putting the rest of the package together, right?
For up to $25,000.
Well, before it was potentially up to $2 million.
Okay.
Before,
yes.
Let's say about 3 days ago.
Okay.
Now it's 25, right? So let's deal with today. Now it's 25. Yes. But basically, it would have been 10 upfront, 15 later. Okay. That's kind of how it's working out now today. 10 upfront, 15 later. So if you applied for an EIDL loan, you probably have not heard. And if someone is out there saying, I don't have a status on it, we don't even have a status on it, because we're kind of on the front lines right now working with small businesses because we're so connected with the SBA. And we have an infrastructure. So even, let's say just in Georgia, we have 17 locations and about 50 consultants across the state. So in every state is set up a little bit differently, but again, they're still spread out across the state. So that's why pretty really across the country, the SBDC is kind of on the economic front lines. Nowhere near where the healthcare workers are doing, putting their lives in danger, but we're definitely on the front lines with small businesses, really working hand in hand with them. So what we've been hearing over the last couple of days is that they've now put a cap on that. What could have been up to 2 million now literally is about 25 total. And with the first 10 hopefully coming soon, and the other now gets 15 coming after. Well, what some people are calling that a grant is if you ask for the advance, and let's say they send it to you, and let's say, though, you got declined for the overall disaster loan.
Right.
They were not going to ask you to pay that $10,000 back. That's how they weren't calling it a grant, but it ends up being like a grant.
So you're speaking in past tense terms, but this is currently the case as well, right?
It's currently the case as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So if you apply for the EIDL loan, let's say right now is, we'll call it 15. Right. Or 25 if you don't ask for an advance. Let's say 25. And if you ask for the advance, that's getting 10 early, 15 later.
Right.
And the 10 is pretty much going to be, I call it forgivable. Right. And again, they don't want to call it a grant, but that's basically what it's going to end up being.
Okay.
Right. So potentially you may only end up owing 15. Right.
And forgivable based off a particular criteria in terms of your use of those funds?
Well, for this one, no. Because this one was supposed to be a quick fix.
Okay.
Get at least something in people's hands immediately while we're still working on the other thing. I use the term forgivable intentionally because now when we talk about the other one there's nuance differences. There's nuance differences. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So that's EIDL.
That's EIDL. Right? Okay. All right. And EIDL advance. So if people are thinking about that $10,000 grant, that's officially the EIDL advance loan that really is converted into a grant or a loan that you have to pay back. Right. So that's kind of that piece. So that was that was in the works almost initially right at the beginning of March, while Congress was still negotiating the stimulus. And just to fast forward, so they negotiated the $2 trillion stimulus package, and part of that $2 trillion stimulus package was $349 billion set aside for small businesses, which was called the Corona Cares Act. Part of that Corona Cares Act was the Paycheck Protection Program, which, now this is the part where you're talking about, if a certain amount of those funds are used for specifically payroll, that and it runs through the period of June 30th, that portion of the loan is forgivable, where you keep track of your documents. You go back to the bank, let's say after that point in time, and say, here are my documents. I use this money for my payroll. They will actually reduce the amount of your loan, right, within that calculation to whatever's left over. Now, if you use 100% of it for payroll, literally 100% of it could be forgiven.
Right.
And to get any portion of it forgiven, you have to use at least 75% of it. Right. So if they gave you 100,000 because let's back up even to that. So how did they even calculate how much you get? So basically they're going to look at your 2019 payroll, and that includes cash compensation plus benefits plus tips and anything related to that entire compensation package. So let's say they're going to divide that number by 12. So let's say you made your payroll is 120,000. Let's make these numbers work. Divided by 12, and your average payroll is $10,000. They're going to take that and multiply that times 2.5. So 10 times 2.5. My example just happens to be 25,000 in this case. We go with 25,000. So that's how much they're going to give you, right? With the intent of, if you haven't laid anybody off, keeping your payroll at the same level. But even if you did lay some people off, to hire back to the level you were before.
Right.
Right. And then the goal would be that you would use, in order to get any of it forgiven, you have to use at least 75%. So let's just use 20,000 right now as a round number. So let's say you use 20,000 for your payroll between now, again, and you're back to the same staffing level you were back in 2019. So now they would, let's say, forgive 20,000 and you'd only owe 5,000 at a 1% interest rate over 2 years.
Yes, and no prepayment penalty.
And no prepayment penalty, exactly, and a 6-month deferment.
Yes, and a 6-month deferment, right? Yeah.
So all that is a part of that process.
So that's what my husband signed up for today, and so now he is the only employee. So he has an LLC and it's just him. But we were able to look at his 2019 tax and see what was in his self-employment, what was his self-employment income, and be able to use that in this process that they say, okay, now divide it by 12, multiply it by 2.5, just like you said, to come up with the amount, for him to be able to use for his payroll as a one person.
Yes.
And his rent for his location.
Absolutely. So as of April 13th, depending on when this is posted, you're exactly right. So anybody, again, if you're self-employed, you absolutely can. And so here's also the difference. So you have to go to a bank, or a lender, to get the PPP, right? The other SBA loan, the EIDL, you don't go to a bank, you go straight to the SBA website, right? But for the PPP, again, solo entrepreneurs, company with employees, nonprofit, for-profit, religious nonprofit can all get the PPP, right? But again, you have to go to a bank, and what happened with the banks is a lot of them, once this became active April the 3rd, unfortunately had a limit, and again, probably because so many, right?
Yeah, so many people
applied at one time. So banks then basically weren't allowing non-customers. If you weren't already a customer of their bank, weren't allowing non-customers to apply. And in other situations, if you were a customer and you didn't meet certain criteria, you couldn't apply, which is very challenging because now it's like, okay, I don't bank with anybody else. Who do I go find? So we've been fielding a lot of those questions and calls in terms of helping people just find and navigate to other types of lenders. Unfortunately, some other lenders are coming online, and there are some banks, probably smaller community banks. If I could just make a general statement, like across the country, United States in particular, look for the smaller community banks, not the big banks, just smaller community banks. If you don't already bank with one, that may again be offering this opportunity, because for them it could be a growth opportunity of getting new customers, right? So look for again those smaller community banks in your own community that may be offering the PPP to non-customers.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so we've talked EIDL, we've talked PPP. Anything else?
There's an unemployment piece in here. So this is important. It's connected to unemployment. So let's say you're an employer and you have been using 1099s, not W-2s. You can't use those 1099 calculations in your calculation of payroll because they're not technically officially on payroll. So they don't use that in the calculation of your 2.5 times your payroll number. But here's one of the reasons why. So when you apply for your PPP, that wouldn't be included. So if it's just you at that point, then it's just you, right? Or if you have a combination of W-2s and 1099s, you can only do the W-2 portion of that group. Well, those 1099s who work for you can actually apply for their own PPP. So even if you're a 1099
that makes sense.
If you're a 1099 contract with somebody else,
right?
Whether you're a quote unquote company or not, doesn't matter. You can go to, again, if you find one, go to a lender, apply for the PPP. That's the reason why they made that distinction, because they didn't want double dipping, if you will.
Makes sense.
The employer applied for it, and that 1099 contractor did it too, but you are still part of the same entity.
Yes.
Right. So 1099 can go do that. And then the 1099 then has the option, though. Now, either they can go apply for the PPP, or they can go actually apply for unemployment. So they can go to the State Department of Labor, and there's actually some state provisions and some federal provisions that is interesting. We've been hearing from some business owners that part of their struggle is some people can make more money right now filing for unemployment than they can staying employed by that employer.
Oh.
So now this employer may have applied for the PPP,
and then have a hard time getting the employee to come back because they're doing better. Okay.
Yeah, on unemployment.
That is very short term, whereas coming back to the business.
Absolutely.
Right.
But then for other business owners, they say, well, do I have to hire, if I had to lay somebody off, but I have to hire back in order to take advantage of the forgiveness portion, do I have to hire the same person back? That answer is no.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay.
Right. So you can hire somebody different, but just at that same, let's say, pay level, right? So all the numbers even out from that standpoint. So for some people, they may say, well, you know what? couldn't fire him before. I didn't have a good reason. Now you may be like, you know what? If you want to walk away, go ahead. Or if you already had to lay them off, unfortunately,
Right.
you potentially could hire somebody different back, and you may end up being, let's say, from a workforce and ability,
Sure.
capability, or fit standpoint, that could work out better. I'm not saying don't do that on purpose, but
Sure.
but for some people that may end up working out like that. But the only point of that is, if you had to lay somebody off and you want to hire back, you don't have to hire back the same person, but you do have to hire back, let's say, at the same compensation level.
Okay. That makes sense. That's super helpful. Are there any other things that come to mind that have been super common questions that you've been fielding for small business owners that you think that you should share here? Or have we covered most of the biggies?
Here's one. Oftentimes we get the question, can you apply for both? Let's say EIDL and PPP. The answer is yes. The only thing is you can't apply the different financial sources to the same expenses, right? So if you get PPP, and I kind of encourage people, if you get PPP, apply it for payroll, right? If you get the EIDL, apply for all your other expenses, right? Because if you only got the PPP, you could apply do other things other than payroll, such as rent and mortgage, business mortgage, utilities, and some of those things. But again, if you apply for both, which I encourage people to do that, because again, you have access to both, and they don't penalize you for getting both, right? But again, you can apply, if you got the PPP, let's say, for payroll expenses, and then apply for the EIDL for other operating expenses. So that way, again, and one practical way, because how are you going to know if you have the same bank account? Well, you actually may have to get a separate bank account
So that you can track.
Exactly. Because again, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of audits, maybe not immediately, but coming down the line.
Not immediately.
Right. Definitely not immediately. Right. Nobody wants that heavy
But
right
you
now.
want to have it to be clean. And especially if there's things that are forgivable, you want to be able to take,
Yes.
you want to be able to get the forgivable aspects and have them forgivable. So if that takes
Absolutely.
separating those out so that you can track all of those expenses appropriately, then it's worthwhile to do so.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And just another kind of real big question is, even going back to the piece of, where individuals say, well, I'm a solo entrepreneur, which programs can I apply for? Well, and then how do I track my compensation, right? So one of the key things, again, if you have to go back to 2019, whether you're taking a draw or just paying yourself regularly, you're going to need documentation to back up what your compensation was. So whatever that is, work with your CPA or whoever that documents how much money you were personally intaking. So even if your company made $100,000 of revenue and you only took 70 of that as personal compensation, right, or whatever your number would be, what is your documentation to track that, right, from that standpoint? And I'm really encouraging people to also just make sure it's consistent, especially if you've already filed taxes, or if you're about to. Make sure it's consistent with the way you filed your taxes.
Yes.
Because again, you don't want to have it look one way because you're trying to get more money over here for PPP, but it doesn't look like that for taxes.
Right. Don't try to game the system. Be
right,
intent.
exactly. I'm saying it'll catch up to you, but if it's not immediate. The other thing is you don't want to catch up to you immediately. Like if they notice it now and then they deny you because it looks like you're trying to do, and it could be an innocent mistake or not really good record keeping. So again, those are just some things to keep in mind. As you're applying, just stay consistent. Because oftentimes, again, I've seen this, outside of this process where people have, used the CPA to lower their tax bill. So it looks great on your taxes, but then it hurts you in business.
Right.
Like, especially if you're going to, and let's say in a normal situation, going to apply for a loan at a bank. Now it looks like your revenues are lower because what your tax person did to help you pay lower taxes. So you got to be careful when you're working with tax people in general, that they understand your entire picture and really your long-term strategy financially, so that they're not helping you short-term and hurting you long-term.
Yeah.
Right. From that standpoint. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. And as far as the SBDC is concerned, you mentioned that there are offices in every state. Is that true?
Every state, and even a couple of U.S. territories such as Puerto Rico and Guam.
Yep.
So I'll send you the website so you can post it. Because basically all you have to do is go to it's americassbdc.org. But it's America plural SBDC then .org. And there's a little drop down basically says find my SBDC. All you got to do is type in your zip code, and literally it will pop up all of the closest SBDCs to your zip code from that standpoint.
Very good. And so beyond the coronavirus craziness, SBDC is a resource available to you.
Absolutely.
On an ongoing basis as a small business owner.
Definitely. And again, and I'm glad, like I said, we had a chance to make this connection as I've been invited in a lot of different organizations to kind of come and just kind of speak on these. And of course, as I'm always following, still kind of stalking online, I guess. I don't make a lot of comments, but I'm a quiet stalker, and definitely blessed by the growth of KDE and the community and what you've done, and how God has really blessed y'all to grow. I'm excited, a little godly jealous, if I could say that. No, I'm joking. But no, it is incredible to see. And so when I scrolled past your thing again, I was like, you know what? Let me just reach out and see if I can be of any service, to your community and helping. Even if it's just a little bit, another fact, they may have heard a lot of stuff already, but even if it's just one thing I could share, that can help them navigate this space. I'm glad I could be able to offer my service and resources.
Thank you. So are you, if people have organizations that they're interested in having, are you volunteering yourself to speak to other organizations, or are you kind of capped out right now?
I'm volunteering, and definitely just working into my schedule right now.
Okay, very good.
I'm doing a lot of these right now.
So how do people connect with you personally if that's something that they would like to have you do with their organization?
So you can email me at paul@paulwilsonjr.com. So just paul@paulwilsonjr.com. Yeah, just shoot me an email, and then we'll try to get it scheduled and get it on your calendar. And again, that's across the country too. Fortunately, again, since SBDC is across the country, I can kind of speak generally about what other SBDCs are doing, but definitely, and also generally about our services. But again, so not just in Georgia, the Southeast, anywhere in the country, that just want somebody to come on and I'll even say this, even be able to merge the two, right? From a kingdom perspective, as well as what's happening in the natural. Especially again, if you're with a faith-based organization, I'd love to be able to do that too. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thanks, Paul.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we encourage you to subscribe and spread the word. And don't forget, you can gain access to even more resources, plus a thriving community of fire starters by visiting our website at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.